So I've had the absolute pleasure of having this incredible 1960 Fender Bassman in the studio for the last few weeks. It's been on loan from Sweet Amps, who I made a video about a few weeks back. And really today I want to put this thing through its paces. Now I've got my own 1959 Bassman, but I thought it'd be fun to do it using this 60 while I've got it here. And I've been meaning to make this video. Is this the most legendary amp of all time? What I want to do is put it through its paces from some low gain bluesy stuff to some more like medium gain rocky stuff, and then throw a few pedals at it with a Strat and see whether we can get it to sound like Jimi Hendrix. So I think we should crack straight on with a 335 type guitar and some blues, and then I'm going to tell you more about this amp. So with the Collings, I definitely preferred the normal channel, I'd say, over the bright channel. Nothing really wrong with the bright channel, but I like to go into that bridge pickup, and it was just a little bit, what's the right, well, over bright, I would say. You got that brightness in the guitar, and you don't really need it extra from the amp. Saying that, I think I would dial the normal channel a tiny bit brighter next time. There was a little bit of darkness in there that I might have taken out, but it had that sweetness I want in the neck pickup and that sort of strident feel to the bridge pickup, which you hear in those old records as well. So this is the sort of end of the era of this particular amp, the 5F6A, which was the last sort of great iteration, I believe, which went from 58 to early 60. And these are the narrow panel tweeds. Now, the Bassman had been around, I think, since about 53, and it had gone through various iterations, some with very few knobs. And by this point, we had a full presence knob, and I believe this was the iteration where the middle knob got added, but I might be wrong about that. We also had the 4 inputs, which you could jump 2 of them, which became a thing that maybe Marshall is even more famous for, but they got their inspiration from here. And this is the amp that Marshall looked at and made the JTM 45 based off of. In a future video, I'll compare a real vintage JTM 45 to the 59 Bassman that I've got here. So I just thought I'd show you the layout here. We've got on and standby, we've got a fuse over there. And then we've got our presence, middle, bass, treble, and then there's the sort of treble input volume and the normal one. And I'll show you in the video, you know, what I'm using when. At the moment, I'm in the bright channel and I'm jumping the other bit of the bright to the normal channel. And by doing that, you can blend everything together, and I tend to find I keep the volume reasonably low by keeping the bright volume lower, and then I'll use the other one to fill it in and add gain. The higher you put that up, the more gain you'll get, and I prefer it this way round, because if you do it the other way round, you'll get a much brighter gain. I prefer to increase the normal volume. Now, as I said, I've borrowed this amp. This one is still for sale. I think it's one of the coolest amps I've ever seen. This is obviously the original cabinet. And apparently this was played by a harpist for most of its life, which I think is pretty cool. And it was built by Rachel at the factory, I think. That's what Jim told me, so there must be something written inside. Now, the only thing changed with this is the original output transformer has been rewound. It hasn't been replaced. 2 of the speakers are the originals, although one of those is reconed, and then 2 of them are Weber Alnicos, which are considered to be the best for the job. And I think these originals are the Jensen P10Rs. Later those became Qs, but I think R is the original ones. So I think part of what makes this amp legendary is that at that time there wasn't really a lot of big amps around with a lot of headroom and 4 speakers that could really project. You know, this is when your amp was your main sound system. Right now they're mic'd up a lot, but then the amp had to do the job. You needed a decent amount of headroom and volume, and I'm not sure they were looking for a huge amount of breakup. I mean, people like Buddy Holly were using these Bassmans right back in those late 50s times, and Buddy Holly's tone isn't particularly broken up, but it needed to be loud. I think obviously as you go forward, people recognised how cool of a tone you could get, you know, as you got into the sort of more early and mid 60s, and the Rolling Stones and Neil Young and other people were around who wanted to crank these things up. And I think what makes them legendary is probably the amount of records that they're on. On top of that, the fact that Marshall turned one of these into a JTM 45, that adds to the whole thing. And I think the flexibility of this amp is incredible, which is what I'm trying to show you through this video. So I think we should move on to another guitar. This is a single P90 double cut junior, and I'll show you how I've changed the settings and we'll talk about it afterwards. So the Junior with the P90 is definitely a brighter guitar generally than a 35, although that 35 is not dark by any stretch. But the way these guitars are, these these double cut juniors generally can be quite raucous and bright. So what I've done is gone into the normal channel instead of bright, knocked the presence down, and then I've increased the bass a little bit. And I wanted to get a bit more grind out of it, so I've increased the mids a fair bit and dropped the treble slightly. So altogether, you know, I wanted to show you what this EQ can do. Okay, so I had the volume on the guitar rolled back quite far there, and now in the next little clip I'm going to push it up a bit more, and then there'll be a third clip of it with it on, I think, pretty much full, and you can hear the range and the cleanup that the guitar can have with this sort of amp. Okay, so now I'm going to use a Telecaster, and in this one I started by putting it in the normal channel, not the bright channel. But in order to increase the sort of like bark of it, I put the mids up a lot. And with amps like this, I know, for example, that Greg Kochmeister, not really sure how to pronounce it. I know he once said that he puts the presence and middle on full and the bass and treble on nothing, I believe. Now, I didn't go quite that far, but I put the presence up a bit and the mids up a lot, and I put it in the normal channel and took some bass out, and you do get a lot more of a bark. But then I decided to get that true sort of bright and creamy Telecaster sound in the bridge pickup. I wanted to put it in the bright channel. So you'll hear it start in the normal channel, and then I'll switch cables and put it in the bright channel. And to be honest, for a Telecaster, this is awesome, this amp, because it doesn't go shrill and bright like some amps do, especially if they're really clean and don't have a lot of mids with a Telecaster. But in an amp like this, when you push the mids, the Telecaster comes to life and it stops being too bright in the bridge and starts being like really rock and roll, you know? So I really enjoy playing the Telecaster through this amp. It brings out sort of woollier low end that I really enjoy. In fact, there's a clip of Matthew Scott playing an Esquire from some time back. And I don't actually know what amp he was using, but in that Esquire, I probably heard for the first time a Tele that has a sort of bigger range and more depth to it. And that's something I've been looking for and figuring out how to dial things in for that. And just starting to get that sort of thing with this broadcaster through a Bassman amp. It feels awesome. This amp is so versatile. I can see, you know, why they're so legendary in the studio and were on stage at one point, because you can do a lot with it. You know, you can coax different things out of the same instrument. You can also get different instruments to suit the amp really easily. Now in the next clip, I was going for a sort of Neil Young vibe. Now I know Neil Young's famous for playing a late 50s deluxe, a 5E3 Tweed Deluxe, which shares some DNA with this amp, so I know they're not exactly the same, but I was using a black Les Paul. Now not like his is a 53 with, I guess, a P90, with P90s converted, or just painted black. It was a gold top. Mine is this custom that I got recently with the 3 pickups, but I wanted to go for that. It's like an edgy, quite bright, dirty clean, pushed amp sound. And I think I really love this sound. Now, despite being a massive fan of Neil Young since I was a kid, I've never actually played anything resembling him. And I just read the tab for Cinnamon Girl like a minute before playing this. I like to challenge myself sometimes and embarrass myself probably. So you'll hear a little bit of the riff in that, and it's not tuned correctly because that's tuned down to D in the low string and the upper string. Anyway, I'm waffling. Throughout this clip, I'll be just playing with the volumes and the pickup selection. I hope you enjoy it. Now, I absolutely love these big amps with a Strat. I think you get that huge Hendrixy vibe, especially if you tune down. This guitar is going to be tuned down to D, like Hendrix did for Voodoo Child, you know, like the slow Voodoo Child. So it's got that sort of big epic sound to me. Now, I'm going to start off just with the reverb pedal, and then I'm going to show you and maybe jump in and chat as I put a fuzz and a UniVibe and a delay, and then also at the end we'll get an overdrive pedal. So for this one, I'm in the bright channel, and you can see the normal volume is really high. I wanted to get a lot of overdrive, and it's also not that quiet on the actual channel that it's in. So this is loud. And then I've got the treble there just past the middle. I don't want it to be too dark at the top end. The bass, this is quite high on a Bassman, and in the end, listening back, I could have had this a notch back, I think. The mids, high enough that it's not over scooped, but I don't want to push those mids and grind it too much, if you know what I mean. Just enough presence for it to work. And I'm going to show you the pedals that I'll be using. So when I label it on the screen with the fuzz, that's the Haze 67 by Isle of Tone, and it's in the middle transistor setting. It's got 3 different settings there for different levels of fatness, basically. Decent amount of fuzz, about halfway around, quite a lot of volume. Yeah, cool pedal. I'll put this on later, and it will just be the blue side, which is like a blues breaker pedal. Then I've got the Jam Univibe, which I've borrowed from a mate, Stuart. And then this has been on for all the videos so far, the Topanga Reverb by Cattle and Bread. Brilliant reverb, not too expensive. And then I will use a bit of this delay, my favourite one, the Analog Man Delay. So I'd say when I kicked in that fuzz, it was when the bass on the amp probably just made it a little bit woollier than I would have liked. I could have dropped that bass. Generally, I'd say the Tweed amps aren't as good, I think, as the black panel amps for fuzz, but I didn't have the fuzz massively like over the top on this, so I think it sounded pretty good. Just added a sort of warmth and an extra fatness to it. But yeah, the amp handles like a bunch of pedals really well, you know, having the fuzz, the UniVibe, the reverb and the delay on. Like it handles it easily, you know, there's enough headroom for that. And if you set it with less overdrive, you know, you could use overdrive pedals and all sorts. It's a big amp, you know, it's got lots of wattage, so it's absolutely fine. So is this the most legendary amp ever? And I'd say, yeah, it is. I mean, it's one of the more famous amps, you know, the late 50s and 1960 Bassman. It's well known. Tweed Bassmans are sort of in the history of music, so to speak, right at the beginning of when things turned towards rock and roll and then proper classic rock. And I think it's been used on so many records that you know, it stood the test of time. Again, the whole Marshall connection, I think, adds to that mythology. But then, what is it like actually playing it? It's a really characterful amp. There's no such thing as a sterile clean, really, out of a Bassman. I mean, you'd literally have to have the volumes both below 1 to make it feel like there wasn't a lot going on. As soon as you've got anything pushed past that, you start to get warmth and bloom. And then the overdrive is just so... it's like really rock and rolly. It grinds. It's just wonderful. And you push that mid knob does so much. It can either scoop it and clean it up quite a lot, or you push that and you're in a territory where like the guitar just wants to bark, and it's great for Telecasters and Les Pauls and P90s. Maybe less so for Strats, depending on what you want. And with the Strat, I love that more scooped thing, and it just sounds massive with a bit of bass in there, and the amp's got enough presence and treble to sort of keep on top of that. As a whole package, well, I've got a 59 Bassman, and I wouldn't want to get rid of that. It's one of those amps, along with my classic Reverb, and that I would think would be in my top 2 or 3 amps. So yeah, maybe the Marshalls went on to be more prominent on stages. You know, they were bigger as well in terms of wattage, but it all started with the Bassman. And if you've been looking for sort of a really cool and unique vintage amp, this particular one, the way it looks and the way it feels and sounds is fantastic. It's very different from my 59. My 59 is got less overdrive, is a bit darker, less lively, doesn't grind as much as this one. And if I could choose between the two, it's possible that I'd actually pick this 60, but I don't know if it's possible to just ask Jim if I can swap them. If he's watched the video, he can let me know. But yeah, I wish I could have this one to sit next to the 59. It's special and does something that's uniquely sort of part of that rock and roll history. So yeah, legendary amp for sure, and has to be in the top 3 or 4 most legendary amps. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this one. I'll finish off with the Strat played with the Blue Protein pedal, which I didn't show you before. If you've got any questions, let me know down in the description. I'll put Sweet Amps link in the description as well. Oh, sorry, if you've got any questions, let me know down in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this, please give me a thumbs up. It really helps. And we're sort of getting towards that 10k subs, and I announced there'll be a giveaway of some Bear PAFs, and you guys seem to have chosen the 59 PAFs, which is what I thought would happen. So I'll keep you updated with that as we get closer to the 10k. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching. Cheers.